Spanish explorers come to America. During this unit, we learn about Leif Erikson and Christopher Columbus, as well as their explorations in the New World. We find out about the earliest encounters between Native Americans and visitors from the Old World. Since some of those explorers entered the Southwest, we learn about the natives who lived in that region. This week, we look at two American landmarks: the Cliff Palace of Mesa Verde, built by ancestors of natives living in the Southwest, and St. Augustine, the first permanent European settlement in the land that became the United States of America. Leif Erikson and Christopher Columbus, Lesson 6. When Native Americans living along the Atlantic coast looked east toward where the sun rose each morning, they probably wondered what was out there beyond the horizon. They had canoes, but as far as we know, they never tried to build large ships so they could sail east. They didn't know that if they sailed far to the east, they would find Europe. On the other side of the Atlantic, Europeans looked to the west and wondered what would happen if they sailed their ships across the ocean. They only knew about the parts of the world shown on the map at the left. Many people knew the world was round, but they did not know if they traveled west, they would discover two continents lying between Europe and the Far East. Finally, courageous Europeans set sail to find out. They discovered the land mass we call North and South America. The first Native Americans known to have met Europeans were ones who lived near the Atlantic Ocean. Historians are unsure about exactly when that first meeting took place. Perhaps it was in 1492, but it might have happened around 1000 A.D. The Vikings. The Vikings were a powerful force in Europe between about 800 and 1100 A.D. The Vikings are also called Nordic peoples. Their homeland is Scandinavia, which includes the modern countries of Norway, Denmark, and Sweden. Go ahead and find Scandinavia on the map above. At the beginning of this period, many Europeans were believers in Jesus Christ, but the Vikings were not. Vikings built ships and traveled great distances to trade and to explore. Fierce Viking warriors often attacked other Europeans. Eventually, they began to move into the areas they conquered. They established many cities, including York, England, and Dublin, Ireland. By the mid-800s, Viking explorers had discovered Iceland. From there, they explored further west. A good result of the exploits of the Vikings was their coming into contact with those who believed in Jesus. Soon, many Vikings became believers. Eric the Red and his son, Leif Erikson. In 985, Eric the Red of Iceland sailed westward to Greenland. He settled there with his family. And according to the Icelandic saga of Eric the Red, Eric's son, Leif Erikson, traveled from Greenland to Norway shortly before 1000 A.D. In Norway, King Olaf I taught Erikson about Jesus, and he became a Christian. The king sent him back to Greenland to convert the settlers to Christ. You'll notice the illustration at the bottom of page 34 shows a Viking ship in Greenland. Now, according to the saga, Erikson headed toward Greenland but lost his way. Instead, he found a place with wild wheat, grapes, and a kind of tree thought to be a maple. Erikson named the rich land Vinland. Many people believe that Vinland was on the eastern coast of Canada in North America. After Erikson left there, he rescued a ship and received its cargo as a reward. Thus, he came to be called Leif the Lucky. Leif Erikson eventually went to Greenland and taught the people about Jesus. One person who became a believer was his mother, Theodhild. She is given credit for guiding the construction of the first church building in Greenland. Another Icelandic saga, Tale of the Greenlanders, tells a different story about the first Viking in North America. In that story, Bjarni Ergulfsson saw North America about 986 A.D. Later, Leif Erikson bought Jarolfsson's ship, sailed to North America himself, and established Vinland. In that saga, Erikson and his crew built dwellings and stayed in Vinland a year or two. Notice the illustrations of the Viking ships on the above and to the right. In 1960, Norwegian explorer and writer Helge Ingstad searched for evidence of Viking settlements along the coasts of New England and Canada. While at Langsong Meadows in Newfoundland, Canada, a local man, George Decker, showed Ingstad some overgrown ridges. Helge and his wife, archaeologist Anne Stein Ingstad, led an international team of archaeologists as they excavated the area around these ridges. They found the lower stones of 8 Viking buildings, a pin that was used to hold a Viking's man's cloak, and a stone oil lamp, 3 tools women used to make clothing or clothes, and many iron boat nails. Perhaps Langsong Meadows was Vinland or another Viking settlement. Its discovery gives evidence that Vikings spent time in North America. Perhaps Vikings met native peoples who lived in Canada, or what became New England, as the illustration to the right suggests. It was almost 500 years before history records more Europeans coming to America. While it is possible that Vikings visited America around 1000 AD, that meeting did not have the impact on history of the world as did the encounters that began in 1492. Christopher Columbus looks for a way to sail to the Far East. In 1451, a boy was born in the seaport town of Genoa, Italy. His name in Italian was Cristoforo Colombo. In English, he is called Christopher Columbus. His father was a wool weaver. The little boy grew up, became a sailor, and moved to Portugal. Christopher Columbus became fascinated with the possibility that people could travel to the Far East by sailing west on the Atlantic Ocean. He tried to get the King of Portugal to sponsor a voyage that would prove this, but the Portuguese king refused. Finally, Columbus convinced King Ferdinand and Queen Isabella of Spain to sponsor his voyage. Notice the picture at the right. Columbus discovers America. Columbus and his crew left Spain on August 3, 1492. They sailed in 3 small ships, the Nina, the Pinta, and the Santa Maria. Like other ship captains of the time, Columbus kept a detailed ship's log. Columbus was a devout Catholic. The first words of his log are, "In the name of our Lord Jesus Christ." His journal tells that he and his crew stopped in the Canary Islands off the western coast of Africa. From there, he and his crew sailed on into the unknown. Finally, on October 12, 1492, Columbus and his crew sighted land. It was one of the islands of the Bahamas, northeast of Cuba. Columbus and his crew went ashore. See the drawing at the lower right for more detail. Since Columbus believed the island was one of the Indies of the Far East near China, he called the people of the island Indians. He didn't realize he had discovered the, quote, New World, unquote. The coming of Europeans brought many changes for Native Americans. In his log, Columbus wrote about wanting to convert the island natives to Christ. Some natives did indeed become believers in Jesus Christ. This was one good result of Europeans discovering North and South America. However, many Native Americans were hurt and many died. Great numbers of natives died because their bodies did not have the immunity to European diseases. Others were killed by the Europeans. Special note. Notice the Columbus armor. Columbus came to America in the Middle Ages when soldiers still wore metal suits of armor. Like other Europeans who came to America later, Columbus and his crew brought armor with them to the New World. The illustration at the left appeared in the 1886 book, Narrative and Critical History of America by Justin Windsor. It is labeled Christopher Columbus's Armor, from the collection in the Royal Palace at Madrid, Spain. Sadly, the first Europeans to meet Native Americans were not only explorers, but also conquerors. Columbus and his crew explored islands in the area and returned to Spain in 1493 with the news of their adventures. When other Europeans learned about what Columbus had found, they wanted to travel there too. Columbus himself returned 3 times. From 1493 to 1496, he explored the islands of the Caribbean Sea. During his journey of 1498 to 1500, he saw South America. During his final journey of 1502 to 1504, he sailed along the coast of Central America. Columbus died at age 54 in 1506. Columbus's discovery in 1492 opened the way first for the Spanish and later for many other Europeans to come to America to explore and to settle. Columbus, like others throughout the ages, was fascinated by the seas God made. In Proverbs, Solomon wrote, "There are three things which are too wonderful for me, for which I do not understand: the way of an eagle in the sky, the way of a serpent on a rock, the way of a ship in the middle of the sea, and the way of a man with a maid." Proverbs 30:18 through 19. Activities for Lesson 6. First, think biblically. Read Psalm 71:15 through 18 and Matthew 28:18 through 20. Imagine you were telling the good news about Jesus to someone who had never heard about him. How would you explain it? Write this in 4 to 6 sentences in your notebook. Secondly, map study. Complete the assignments for Lesson 6 on Map 5, titled Europe and the Western Hemisphere. Thirdly, timeline. In Timeline of America the Beautiful, next to 1000 AD, write, Viking explorers land on the North American continent. Fourthly, literature. Read titled Journal of Christopher Columbus in We the People, page 6. Fifthly, creative writing. Think about the attitude that Columbus and other Europeans had towards Native Americans. What were the good and bad things that happened because Columbus came to America? In your notebook, write 1 or 2 paragraphs giving your own opinion. Lastly, student workbook or lesson review. If you are using one of these optional books, complete the assignment for Lesson 6.